and delay the return to surplus if the developed economies drag down the global economy?
I'm determined, Laura, to see the budget return to surplus in 2013, as we've promised, and that would be 3 years earlier than originally predicted, and it would be in front of any other major advanced economy in the world. Now, I agree with you as we look at the international outlook. We've got to be careful, and there are fragilities and some troubling signs, and we've got to keep them under close watch. We, of course, do still have some economic stimulus, though it is coming out of our economy, helping support jobs. I believe, Laura, when we look at our future economy, including looking at international events, the truth is that when the global financial crisis hit, we as a government did have the better economic plan. If we had done what Tony and others suggested, we would be in a deep recession and literally hundreds of thousands of Australians would be out of work with all of the problems that come with it, losing your home, the things we see happen on our TV screens overseas, people losing their houses, having their mortgages foreclosed. We avoided that. We've got people in work, and I believe for the future we've got the better economic plan. And I do note that Tony's talked about the things he believes in. Well, what he hasn't told you in that recitation when it comes to the better economic plan is he wants to put company tax up. Company tax on businesses like Coles and Woolworths, which would feed through to the prices that people pay on everyday items. Bad for cost of living pressures, bad for jobs.
But, Prime Minister, just quickly, the question is about a double-dip recession. If that happens, will you stimulate the economy again?
Well, whilst there are some troubling international signs, I am not predicting that. And
not ruling it in or out?
Well, I don't think it is for me to rule in every economic circumstance around the global economy, but for us, I am very confident that we can deliver, as we promised, in the budget with the surplus in 2013.
Tony Abbott, your response?
Look, the government likes to claim credit for avoiding the global financial crisis, but all serious observers would say that Australia's relative economic success owes far more to the reforms of previous governments than it does to the spending spree of the current government. Now, obviously, when the global financial crisis was at its worst in late 2008, some stimulus was necessary. But with this government, it was too much too soon. Yes, it's important to act to save jobs, but that never justifies waste. And what we have seen from this government is almost obscene waste in programs like the Pink Bats program and in programs like the School Halls program, which the Prime Minister was herself responsible for as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Education. Now, we all know that there's been rip-off after rip-off in the School Hall program, and I suggest that it's very difficult to trust the Prime Minister with $350 billion of government spending when we couldn't trust her to deliver $16 billion of government spending without enormous waste. Now, as for the possibilities that might arise in the future, unfortunately, because of its extravagance, this government has put Australia in a somewhat weaker position to respond to any subsequent economic problems.
Next question's from Malcolm Farr.
Mr Abbott, I think it was last Sunday you were in Western Sydney and you were listing the increases in the cost of living that have been hitting families. I think at one stage you mentioned bread prices had gone up 11%.
12%, I think.
12.
11.7%.
I'm glad you remembered that. I had forgotten that detail. Now, can you remember what policies you would implement in government, specifically referring to groceries, that would keep prices down?
What we wouldn't do is promise something called Grocery Watch and then not deliver, which of course is what the current government did. Look, the best thing we can do is get government spending under control, get debt and deficit under control, because if we get debt and deficit under control, there's less pressure for higher taxes, and if we aren't out there borrowing $100 million a day every single day as a government, there's more money available to be borrowed by others, by small business. So that essentially is the best thing we can do right now to help all the people who are suffering in the hardscrabble marketplace. It's to try to get debt and deficit under control. Families have to live within their means, and government should live within its means too.
But just to be specific on Malcolm's question, what would you do to reduce grocery prices or keep them down?
Look, I will not make the mistake that the former government, that the former opposition, now the government did, and promised to do something which is pretty much impossible to dictate from government. Sure, you can try to ensure that there's competition in the markets, and we'd try to do that. Sure, you can try to ensure that we've got the best possible settings by government, but government can't, with the stroke of a pen, reduce grocery prices, and it was very foolish, verging on the fraudulent, for the Labor Party to make that promise before the last election.
Prime Minister, your response on this cost of living question?
Well, very, very quickly, if you put an extra tax on big companies like Coles and Woolworths, as Tony is proposing to do, guess what? Prices go up because they'll be looking to recoup that tax from consumers. Now, that's Tony's policy setting. That's the reality of what he would do if he was Prime Minister. For families, I believe in taking a bit of pressure off. We've delivered tax cuts 3 years in a row. We created the education tax rebate, and I've recently said we'd extend it to school uniforms, help with those costs of getting kids to school. We increased the childcare tax rebate to 50% of out-of-pocket cost, give that extra helping hand with the cost of childcare. We did a major increase in the pension to help older Australians, particularly with the pressures that are on them. These are measures to help with cost of living. And then there's the other side of the equation. What's in your pay packet, which clearly is about your security at work. We ended work choices, delivered the Fair Work laws. I was very proud to do that as the relevant minister and get it through Parliament. And of course, we've spent much of this first week of the campaign canvassing Tony's camouflage around the plan to bring back the worst aspects of work choices.
All right, our next question comes from Chris Hillman.
Ms Gillard, Australia is committed to a target of 5% reduction in carbon emissions by 2020, and you're committed to putting on a carbon price. How long can we go before we reach the point of no return? And what year will we get to where Australia can't meet that cut because you've delayed too long? And you yourself said last year, to delay is to deny.
Chris, I'm an optimist, and I believe we can work our way to a community consensus about putting a cap on carbon pollution and designing the market-based mechanism that will support that. Now, we had a consensus in Parliament House, and obviously Tony became opposition leader and ended that consensus, and the rest, as we all know, is history. Now I believe we've got to take the community with us to get a deep and lasting consensus, and if elected Prime Minister, then I will lead that debate to take the community with us. I'll work with some honest, decent Australians in our Citizens' Assembly to get the job done, and at the same time we will be implementing measures that make a difference for carbon emissions. But I'm not going to kid people. We're not going to get to those targets unless we put a cap on carbon pollution and have a market-based mechanism. And Tony, I think, now rules that out entirely. And what that means is under his plan, we would see him pay polluters and carbon pollution go up by 13% by 2020. That's not the way forward. I'm going to lead to get a community consensus to find that ultimate way forward, and in the meantime we'll be acting. Record investments in solar and renewables, the transmission lines to bring that power to your home through the national electricity grid, changing the cars we drive, making differences to where we work with greener buildings, no more dirty power stations, as well as rewarding those companies that do the right thing early.
But Prime Minister, the question is, have you been advised there's a date at which it's too late and we fail to meet the target we've committed to?
I think we can do what we have committed to do. I believe we can get there. We'll get there with the cap on carbon pollution.
When does it have to happen?
Well, we need to work through. I've said, as Prime Minister, I would assess this in 2012. But what I'm not going to do, David, what I'm definitely not going to do is try